Hi everyone and welcome back to Brainbox Unleashed. Today we'll be covering the second chapter, which is cultural change from the book Social Change and Development in India. And I'll be covering this chapter in three parts. Now in the last video we learned about structural changes that happened in India due to British colonialism. And if you missed that video and would like to watch it, you can click on the link that appears on the upper right hand corner of your screen, or you can click on the eye icon on the upper right hand side. Now before we start, let me quickly tell you that if you want the explanations of these chapters to be in Hindi, so just let me know down in the comment section. Now in the previous video we learned that whenever any kind of structural change happens, there is a cultural change accompanying it, right? Structural changes just doesn't happen alone, it happens along with a cultural change. So we'll be in this chapter we'll be looking at those cultural changes that happen because of some structural change, right? Now let us see what this chapter talks about. This chapter looks at two developments which are related to each other, and those developments happened as a result of colonial rule. The first one is the deliberate and conscious efforts made by 19th century reformers and early 20th century nationalists who tried to bring in changes in the social practices that were there in India at that time. And these social practices were mainly discriminatory towards women and lower castes. So they tried to bring in changes which would actually make a better society. Then you have the less deliberate, which were not so intentional like the first ones, but they were decisive changes, and they can be seen as four processes, namely Sanskritization, Westernization, Modernization, and Secularization. Now, Sanskritization was there even in the pre-colonial times, even before the British came to India. Sanskritization was happening. But the other three, which are modernization, secularization, and westernization, they happened only when the British came to India, only as a result of colonial rule in India. Okay, so and before we start looking at these cultural changes, we need to look at two terms which have been defined in the beginning of the chapter, and they are important if you are a student of sociology. So the first one is social structure. Social structure refers to a continuous arrangement of persons in relationships defined or controlled by institutions. Now, let me just begin with an example. For example, in your house, in your living room, you have arranged the furniture in such a way that all of the people who will be sitting there in the living room will be facing each other, right? So that is a structure. You have created or made a structure, and in that structure you have placed items in such a way that whenever people sit in the living room, they are facing each other, right? Or for example, when a new building is constructed, the way the pillars are placed, the way the walls and windows and doors are placed, it gives rise to a certain kind of a structure, right? Similarly, in a society, the way people are arranged and how these people are engaged in relationships, what kind of relationships these people have with each other, and how these people are governed by institutions, they are controlled by institutions, it gives rise to a structure, right? For example, family. In a family, you see, mostly I'll talk about the Indian family. Who is the head of the family? The father. Or if grandfather is there, then it will be the grandfather, right? Then you have your the mother, then the children, right? So that is a structure. It is a social structure. Then the other term which has been mentioned is culture. Culture is very simple. It means, in the very simplest term words, it means way of living. The way people live is culture. Now, to define it properly, it refers to socially established norms or patterns of behavior. Now, in a society, certain rules and norms, they are being followed by generations of people, right? First, say your grandfather's generation followed it, then your father's generation followed those norms, then you are following it. So it has been there in the society for quite a long period of time. They are established norms, right? And they are the ways in which people live, by which people live. So that is culture, right? It's very simple. The way people live is known as culture. Now we'll look at the social reforms that happened in the 19th and early 20th century. Now, in that time, and even before the Britishers came to India, certain kinds of social evils were present in the Indian society, like sati. I'm sure all of you know what sati is. Now, whenever in those times, whenever the husband died, it could be from any cause. Maybe he died in battle or he died from some kind of ailment. Whenever the husband died, the woman, the wife, she also had to sacrifice herself by sitting along with her husband in the funeral pyre. Now, pyre as in chita, right? When the bodies are cremated, the the wife had to sit along with the husband and they were burned together, right? So that was a social evil. Then you had child marriage at that time. Young children were getting married, at the age of maybe 8 years old, 10 years old, they were getting married. So the problem of child marriage was there. Then the issue of widow remarriage. Now, women at that time, they were not allowed, if their husbands died and they were widows, they were not allowed to remarry. So reformers tried to change that. Then also we had caste discrimination at that time. Caste was very heavily present at that time, and everything revolved around castes. Occupation of the people and everything revolved around caste. So reformers, these social reformers, they tried to do away with all these social evils. Now, not just these reforms did not just happen in 19th and 20th century. They happened even in pre-colonial times. For example, Buddhism. Buddhism tried to do away with certain social evils, like the religion of Buddha or Buddhism. It was open to all. Any people, no matter what his caste is, no matter what his social standing is, he was welcome into Buddhism. Even women were allowed to become a part of the Sangha, Buddhist Sangha, right? Or Sangh. So it tried to bring about a change in society, Buddhism. Then you had the Bhakti movement and the Sufi movement. Now, Bhakti means what? It means devotion to God, right? It was to bring about a change in the Hindu society, and Sufism for Islam. And they wanted a more egalitarian society, a more equal society, rather than caste based society. They wanted, or maybe society divided along religious lines. They did not want that. They wanted a Hindu Muslim unity. They wanted Hindus and Muslims to live together in peace, and as should be, right? That should be the case. And now these were pre-colonial efforts. They were trying. These were happening in pre-colonial times. Then again, how were they different from the 19th century efforts? They were different in the sense that the 19th century reforms had a mix of Western ideas in them, right? Because these 19th century people, they were getting Western education, they were influenced by Western ideas of liberalism, equality, democracy, and so they wanted the society also to be reformed in that manner. So that is how they were different from the pre-colonial efforts. Now, in the NCERT book, there's this box 2.1, and here it shows the kind of changes the reformers were trying to bring about. For example, Ram Mohan Roy or Raja Ram Mohan Roy, he attacked the practice of sati. And how did he do that? He attacked it on the basis of both appeals to humanitarian and natural Buddhist doctrines as well as Hindu Shastras. So he said that the practice of sati, it was against humanitarian values. It was inhumane to allow the wife to be burned alive along with her husband. And also, he appealed it on the grounds of natural rights, that the woman had natural right to life and liberty, right? So she should be allowed to exercise those rights, and not and her life should not be taken as such a small thing, and her life should be sacrificed in that manner. So then he also looked at the Hindu Shastras and said that no, what this practice has become is very wrong. It is sati was never mentioned in such a manner in the Hindu Shastras. Go back and look in the Shastras. Go and read those Shastras. You will see that this practice wasn't there. Then in the second point, you see Ranade's writings entitled The Texts of the Hindu Law on the Lawfulness of the Remarriage of Widows and The Vedic Authorities for Widow Remarriage elaborated the Shastric sanction for marriage of widows. So M.G. Ranade, Mahadev Govind Ranade, he had written certain books. 2 books are mentioned here, and in those books he talked about the rights of widows to remarry. Now, like I said earlier, widows were not allowed to remarry. So Ranade felt that that was wrong, and these women who were widows, they had even though their husband had died, they still had the right to continue their life and be happy in their life, right? So they had the right to remarry. So he tried to bring about a social reform in that sense. Then the third point, the content of new education was modernizing and liberal. The literary content of the courses in the humanities and social sciences was drawn from the literature of European Renaissance, Reformation, and Enlightenment. Its themes were humanistic, secular, and liberal. Now, like we learned in the previous chapter as well, Indians were getting exposed to Western education, and in the humanistic or in the humanities and social sciences courses, the content was derived from the times of the European Renaissance and the Reformation movement that happened, and the Enlightenment period that Europe saw. So, and the themes were humanistic. It gave more importance to human values. Then it also gave more importance to a secular society. It wanted society to be more secular rather than letting it be driven by religion. And it wanted the society to be liberal instead of being conservative in its thought. Then you have Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's interpretation of Islam emphasized the validity of free inquiry or ijtihad and the alleged similarities between Quranic revelations and the laws of nature discovered by modern science. Now, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, he was born into an elite Muslim family who had connections with the Mughals, and he also had Western education, so he was influenced by Western ideas, and he thought that the future of Muslims in India as well as outside India did not look so bright, because Muslims at that time were so orthodox that they were not receptive to changes. They did not want many changes to come about, and so it was quite a conservative community, and so he wanted to bring a change in that. Now, how did he do that? He tried to reinterpret the Quran along scientific lines. He showed how actually the Quran talks about scientific things. Like the Quran talks about the Big Bang theory, how the universe came into being. It also talks about embryology, how a human being is born from an embryo, right? So he tried to open up the Islamic discussion to science. He wanted to bring more scientific thought and temper into Islamic community. Then you have Kandukiri Viresalingam's The Sources of Knowledge reflected his familiarity with Navya Nyaya logic. At the same time, he translated Julius Huxley. Now, Kandukiri Viresalingam, he talked about Navya Nyaya logic. Now, Nyaya, it was one of the schools of Indian philosophy. Nyaya means what? Justice, right? And it was a new justice. Navya means what? New? A new or neo justice or neo Navya. So, and that focused more on radical thinking, more practical thinking. And at the same time, he also translated Julius Huxley. Now, Julius Huxley, he was an evolutionary biologist. He talked about natural selection and all those things. We don't need to get into those. But that means he was also inquisitive about scientific thought, right? And so he translated Julius Huxley in the hopes that people would read it and get influenced by it. Now, sociologist Satish Sabharwal, he talks about or he shows three aspects to the modern framework of change in colonial India. Now, he showed how the changes in colonial India happened, and he shows three aspects of it. Like, number one, modes of communication. He says new technologies like the printing press, the telegraph, microphones, steamships, railways, they actually speeded up communication. Now people could move more faster and more easily. Not even people, not just people. Ideas were moving much faster through the printing press, through the telegraph, right? Then, for example, you see Keshav Chandra Sen of Bengal, he visited Madras in 1864. Now that happened only because modern means of transport were developed and were brought into India, right? And who did that? The British, right? The British, they laid the first railway line in 1853 from Bombay to Thane, right? So they introduced the modern means of transport and communication to India. Then you have the Christian missionaries who reached remote corners of present-day Nagaland, Mizoram and Meghalaya. Now, if you have ever visited the Northeast or if you've read about it, then you'll know that a sizable portion of the population here in the Northeast are Christians. And how did that happen? It happened because these Christian missionaries, they came here and they spread the religion of Christianity here. And that was also possible because of the modern means of transport and communication, right? Then the second aspect Sabharwal talks about is the forms of organization. He says that modern social organizations like the Brahmo Samaj, which was founded by Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and the Arya Samaj in Punjab, that was set up. Then the All India Muslim Ladies Conference was also founded in 1914. So different kind of social organizations were coming up as a result of these reformers being influenced by Western ideas. Then Indian reformers now debated not just in public meetings but through public media like the newspapers and journals. They were debating in newspapers, they were debating in journals, and in the hopes that other people would read them and get influenced by them. Then translations of writings of social reformers from one language to another took place. Now social reformers say in one place they were writing about something they wanted in the society, some kind of change they wanted in the society, and they were writing about it. Then some other person in some other state read it, and they were translating it into their own language so that the people of that state could read it. So this way ideas were being communicated. For example, Vishnu Shastri, he published a Marathi translation of Vidyasagar's book in Indu Prakash in 1868. Okay, so these were the changes that were happening. Then the third aspect he talks about is nature of ideas. He says that new ideas of liberalism, freedom, homemaking and marriage, role for mothers and daughters, self-conscious pride in culture and tradition emerged. Now, Indian people or the Indian middle class mainly, they were getting influenced by Western ideas of liberalism, freedom, how homemaking and marriage was different in the West and how it was different here in India. Then the role of mothers and daughters, how it was different in Britain, how it was different in India. Then now people were also becoming more self conscious and taking pride in their own culture and heritage. Now, education was also given more importance. It was seen as crucial for the nation to become modern but also retain its ancient heritage. So, they wanted the nation to become modern but at the same time not give up on its ancient heritage, on its traditions. They wanted India to become modern but also have traditional values along with it. The idea of female education was debated intensely. Reformers argued that for a society to progress, women need to be educated. Now, that is obviously true. Now, these reformers, they wanted female education. Now, in those times, the women were not allowed to be educated and go to schools. So, these reformers, they said that no, for the nation to be educated, women have to be for the nation to be modern and progressive, the women of the nation have to be educated. And some even said that in pre-modern India also women were educated. But some said no, that was just in the privileged classes of people only. It was not happening in among the common masses. So they were trying to justify female education by looking at modern ideas as well as saying that no, it happened in pre-modern India also. So they were trying to take the help of both traditional as well as modern ideas to justify female education. Then a social reformer Jyotiba Phule, she opened the first school for women in Pune. Then you have Muslim social reformers who actively debated the meaning of polygamy and parda. For example, a resolution against the evils of polygamy was proposed by Jahanara Shah Nawaz at the All India Muslim Ladies Conference. Now, what is polygamy? Polygamy is a system where a man can marry many times. He can take multiple wives. He can have multiple wives. Okay, and parda system is like the burqa, right? That is not just there in Islam, that is there in Hinduism as well. Like in certain cultures, you have the ghungat, right? So at that time, the Muslim social reformers, now they were debating the meaning of polygamy and parda because the system of polygamy had been abused. What was written in the Quran was not exactly being followed. Now, men were just marrying for the sake of it, just for the sake of having multiple wives, they were just marrying, right? So, now there is a reason mentioned in the Quran as to why a man can have multiple wives. Maybe because the woman is unfortunate, she belongs to a very poor family, and in order to help her out, so a man could have multiple wives. So there are other numerous reasons as well, which I am not entirely sure about. So so the reformers, they were trying to argue that the kind of polygamy that was being followed is wrong and it shouldn't be happening. Like for example, Jahanara Shah Nawaz, she argued that in the All India Muslim Ladies Conference. Then they also argued against the parda system that was prevalent in the Muslim community. Like women should not just be kept in parda and they should be allowed to go out of their houses and mingle with the society and take part in education and not just be behind the four walls of the houses. Now, as this nature of ideas were changing, now as this as the people were getting more influenced by Western ideas, for some, they were mainly concerned with the upper caste people or the middle class women and men, whatever problems they faced. But for others, they were looking more at the discriminated castes like the Dalits. So they were taking up the issues of the Dalits. So that was these were the kind of changes that were happening in the 19th and the early 20th century, right? So we finished with that part of the chapter, that portion of the chapter. Next, in the next video, we'll start with the four processes that we mentioned earlier, like Sanskritization, Westernization, Modernization, and Secularization, right? So I hope this video helped, and do check out the other videos from this channel, and thank you for listening, everybody.